My stepchildren made it clear they'd only listen to their real father. So I stopped being their provider. The lesson came faster than anyone expected. My name's Daniel, I'm 43, and I never thought I'd be the type of guy writing one of these long confessional posts online. But here we are. Maybe I need advice. Maybe I just need to get this off my chest. Or maybe I just want to tell the truth about what happens when kindness meets entitlement under one roof. I've been married to my wife, Laura, for 3 years now. We met in the least dramatic way possible, in the pickup line outside our kids' elementary school. She was juggling coffees and a laptop bag, I was trying to stop my twins from turning the back seat into a WWE ring. I made some joke about needing helmets just to survive school pickup, and she laughed. That laugh turned into small talk, which turned into coffee, which eventually turned into something real. At the time, I had 3 kids of my own, 11-year-old twins Liam and Lucas, and my youngest, Sophie, who was 7 then. Laura had 2 kids, Ethan, 15, and Ava, 13. Her ex, Chris, lived about half an hour away, and they had the every other weekend custody thing worked out. When Laura and I first introduced the kids, I was nervous. Blending families is tricky, and I didn't want mine to feel replaced, or hers to feel invaded. But those first couple of weekends actually went better than I expected. The twins were excited to have older siblings around, Sophie followed Ava around like a shadow, and Ethan was polite enough, though a little standoffish. Laura told me not to worry, that's just his personality. And me? I thought I'd hit the jackpot. A second chance at marriage with a woman I loved, 5 kids in the house, and the possibility of building a big, happy blended family. Sure, I knew there'd be bumps, but I truly believed love and patience could win over anyone. That if I just showed up consistently, treated the kids with kindness, and made sure they felt included, they'd eventually respect me. I was wrong. In the early months after Laura and I got married, I felt like a man trying to assemble a puzzle with no picture on the box. I didn't know what the final image of our blended family was supposed to look like, but I was determined to make the pieces fit. I went out of my way to include Ethan and Ava in everything. Family movie nights? I let them pick the film, even if it was something I'd rather chew glass than watch. Weekend dinners? I asked what their favorite meals were and learned how to cook them. When the twins and I played basketball in the driveway, I made sure Ethan got the first pick for teams. When Sophie wanted to paint, I bought extra brushes so Ava could join. It wasn't just about activities. It was about trying to show them, hey, I see you. I'm not trying to replace your dad. I just want to be a steady, safe person in your life. I even went a step further financially, because I figured actions spoke louder than words. I paid for Ethan's new cleats when his old ones fell apart mid-season. I bought Ava the art set she'd been eyeing online. I added both of them to the family cell phone plan. It wasn't about buying love, at least not in my head. It was about making sure they never felt like the outsiders in our house. But here's the thing about respect, you can't force it, and you can't purchase it. The first small cracks showed up maybe 6 months in. I remember coming home from a grocery run, arms full of bags, and asking Ethan to give me a hand unloading the car. Simple request. He didn't even look up from his phone. You're not my dad, he said flatly. I don't have to listen to you. It was like a glass of cold water straight to the face. I froze for a second, trying to process if I'd actually heard him right. Before I could answer, Laura walked in and told him to help me. He did, but with a scowl that could have curdled milk. The whole time he muttered under his breath like the groceries were bags of radioactive waste I'd forced him to touch. I told myself not to take it personally. He's a teenager. He's adjusting. It's hard having another man in the house when you're used to being the oldest male. I gave him grace. Maybe too much. Then there was Ava. At first, she and Sophie were inseparable. Sophie adored having an older sister to follow around, and Ava seemed to enjoy the attention. But slowly, she started pulling away. She'd leave messes in the living room, and when I asked her to clean them up, she'd just blink at me like I was speaking Martian. My mom didn't tell me to, she'd say, then walk off like the conversation was over. I'd laugh it off in front of her, but inside, I felt that slow burn of frustration. What am I supposed to do here? Beg you to respect me in my own house? And yet, despite those red flags, I doubled down on patience. I thought if I kept showing up, kept being kind, kept providing, kept trying, they'd eventually come around. But if I'd been listening more closely, I would have realized the warning signs weren't just cracks. They were fault lines. And sooner or later, something was going to break. The little moments piled up like bricks on my shoulders. None of them seemed heavy enough to break me on their own, but together they started forming a wall between me and Laura's kids. Take dinner, for example. I love cooking, it's my therapy after work. I'd spend an hour making something special for the whole family, a meal meant to bring everyone together. Plates steaming on the table, the twins teasing each other, Sophie trying to sneak bites before we said grace. And then Ethan would lean back in his chair, fork in hand, and ask Laura, "Is it okay if I eat this?" Not me. Not a polite thank you. Not even silence. Just a deliberate pause, waiting for his mom's nod as if I'd poisoned the food. Sometimes Ava would follow suit, echoing him like it was some kind of running joke. Laura would give them a look, but she never pressed the issue. "They'll grow out of it," she'd whisper to me later. But I didn't want them to grow out of it. I wanted them to respect that I was putting effort into caring for them. The defiance didn't stop at meals. If I asked Ethan to take out the trash, he'd stare at me blankly, then say, "I'll wait for Mom to tell me." If I asked Ava to turn down the TV, she'd shrug and answer, "You're not the boss of me." At first, I tried humor. "Well, if I'm not the boss of you, then I guess you can pay the electric bill for that TV." They'd roll their eyes, laugh it off, and ignore me anyway. After a while, the jokes stopped being funny. It wasn't just about me, either. My kids started to feel the cracks. One evening, Sophie came to me clutching her sketchbook like it was a wounded bird. "Ava said my drawings look like a kindergartner's," she whispered. Tears streaked her cheeks. I flipped through the pages, bright, messy bursts of color, unicorns and trees and crooked houses. She was 7. They were exactly what her drawings were supposed to look like. I wanted to march straight to Ava and let her have it, but I held back. She's a teenager. Teenagers can be cruel. Don't escalate it. Instead, I told Sophie her art was beautiful, because it was. Still, I couldn't shake the sting. The twins weren't spared either. Ethan started rating their sports equipment without asking, and when Liam and Lucas confronted him, he smirked and said, "What are you gonna do about it? Your dad doesn't make the rules for me." That night, Lucas asked me the question I'd been dreading. "Dad, why do they only listen to Mom? Why don't they have to follow your rules too? What do you even say to that?" I stumbled through an answer about different households, different parents, different dynamics. But the truth was simpler and sharper. Ethan and Ava didn't respect me, and everyone in the house could feel it. Every time I brought it up to Laura, she had the same response. "They're still adjusting. Chris tells them all the time that they don't need to listen to anyone but him. It's confusing for them. Just give it more time." Time, though, wasn't healing anything. Time was teaching them that they could disrespect me without consequence. And once kids learn they can cross a line without punishment, they don't stop walking. They run. If you'd walked into our house during that period, you might not have noticed anything was wrong. On the surface, it looked like a big, loud family juggling school, sports, and dinner schedules. But if you stayed long enough, you'd feel it, that tension you can't quite put your finger on, the way a room feels colder after someone walks out of it. The pattern became predictable. Ethan or Ava would push too far, ignoring me, mocking one of my kids, or treating me like a stranger in my own home. Laura would step in, they'd mumble an apology, and for a few days things would smooth over. I'd think, maybe this time it'll stick. And then, without fail, we'd be right back where we started. One night the twins came home from soccer practice fuming. Their gym bags were dumped in the garage, cleats scattered, and when I asked what happened, Liam blurted it out. "Ethan wore my jersey today, Dad." He didn't even ask. And when I said he couldn't, he laughed and called me a baby. Lucas chimed in, face red. He said, "You don't make the rules for him. That you're just our dad, not his." The words hit me like a punch to the ribs. I tried to brush it off, reassure them. "Don't worry about Ethan, guys. You're not babies. You're my team." But inside, I was furious, not just at Ethan, but at the way his contempt was bleeding into my kids' confidence. Sophie, too, was shrinking. She stopped inviting Ava to color or play pretend. I caught her one afternoon tearing a drawing out of her sketchbook before anyone could see it. When I asked why, she whispered, "Ava's just gonna laugh at me again." That was the moment I realized this wasn't just my problem anymore. It was infecting my kids. My home was supposed to be their safe place, the one spot in the world where they didn't have to question if they belonged. But now even here, they were second-guessing themselves. I sat down with Laura one night after the kids were in bed. The living room was dark except for the glow of the muted TV. "Laura," I said, trying to keep my voice steady, "this can't keep happening. The kids see it. They feel it. It's not just about me, it's about how it's affecting Liam, Lucas, and Sophie." She rubbed her forehead, looking exhausted. "I know, Daniel. I talk to them, I really do. But they're teenagers. They're influenced by Chris. He tells them you're not their dad, that they don't owe you anything. They're caught between two worlds. What do you expect me to do?" I wanted to shout, "I expect you to back me up. I expect us to be a team." But instead, I swallowed the words. They don't have to call me dad. They don't even have to like me. But in this house, they need to respect me. Otherwise, what kind of example are we setting? She sighed. Just, give it more time. Time. Always time. But time wasn't healing. Time was making things worse. The more I waited, the more emboldened Ethan and Ava became. Their disrespect wasn't just directed at me anymore. It was creeping into how they treated their siblings. It was poisoning the air we breathed. And though I didn't know it yet, the breaking point was closer than I thought. The breaking point came on a Tuesday night, one of those long evenings where the house felt like it was sagging under its own chaos. The twins were sprawled on the floor, half-finished math homework around them. Sophie sat at the kitchen table, tongue poking out of the corner of her mouth as she carefully colored in the petals of a flower. I was standing at the stove, stirring spaghetti sauce, when I heard the laughter. Not Sophie's, not the twins'. It was sharper, mocking. "Wow," Ethan said, his voice dripping with disdain. "You call that a flower? My little cousin could draw better than that, and he's 4. Ava giggled beside him. "Yeah, sophomore. Maybe you should just stick to coloring books. At least then you can't mess it up." I saw Sophie's shoulders stiffen. She didn't look up, didn't say a word. Just pressed harder with her crayon until the paper tore. The sound of that ripping page went through me like nails on glass. "Hey," I said sharply, dropping the spoon and crossing the room. "Knock it off. That's enough." Ethan leaned back in his chair, smirking. "Relax. We're just joking." "No," I snapped, louder this time. "You're not joking. You're tearing her down. And I'm done with it." For a moment, silence hung in the air. Sophie stared at the ruined drawing, lip trembling. The twins had stopped working, watching me with wide eyes. Even Ava shifted uncomfortably. "Ethan, though?" He doubled down. "You can't tell me what to do. You're not my dad. I don't have to listen to you." The words weren't new. I'd heard them before, whispered under his breath, tossed out in defiance. But this time they hit different. Because he wasn't just dismissing me, he was crushing my daughter to prove a point. I felt something snap inside me. That invisible line I'd been stretching, bending, trying not to break? It broke. I walked over, pulled the ruined page gently from Sophie's hands, and crouched beside her. "Sweetheart, your flower is beautiful," I told her, loud enough for everyone to hear. "Don't ever let anyone make you believe otherwise." Then I turned back to Ethan. "You're right," I said evenly, my voice low but steady. "I'm not your dad. But I am the man who puts a roof over your head, food on your plate, and clothes on your back. And if you can't respect me in my house, then you don't get the benefits of living here." His smirk faltered. Just a flicker, but I saw it. That night, after the kids were in bed, I told Laura point blank, "I'm done begging for respect in my own home. If Ethan and Ava only answer to Chris, then Chris can provide for them. Because I won't keep paying the price for being disrespected." She looked at me like I'd grown a second head. "Daniel, you can't mean that." But I did. Every word of it. That night, I barely slept. I lay in bed staring at the ceiling, listening to Laura breathe beside me, and all I could think about were the last 3 years. Every little slight, every act of disrespect from Ethan and Ava, every time Laura had told me to just give it more time. But time hadn't fixed a thing. It had only taught them that they could treat me like I didn't exist. By 2 in the morning, I'd made my decision. If they wanted me invisible, then fine, I would disappear from their lives. But so would everything I provided for them. The next day, while the house was quiet, I sat at the kitchen table with my laptop open and a notebook beside me. I went through every single bill, every account, every privilege they enjoyed in this house. The mortgage, the utilities, the internet, the cell phones, the car insurance, even the streaming accounts they spent hours on. All of it, in my name. All of it, paid for by me. And with every note I scribbled down, the picture became clearer. Authority and responsibility go hand in hand. If they refused to recognize my authority, then they didn't get my responsibility either. So I started making calls. First, the cell phone company. I had Ethan and Ava's lines disconnected within 10 minutes. Then the cable provider. Then the internet. I went down the list, one by one, cutting off the privileges they had taken for granted. By the time I was finished, I felt calmer than I had in months. Laura walked in later that afternoon to find me at the table, paperwork spread out everywhere. She frowned, set her bag down, and asked me what I was doing. I didn't even look up. "I'm making good on what I said," I told her. "Ethan made it clear I'm not his dad, so I'm making sure he doesn't have to rely on me for anything a dad would provide." Her face went pale. "Daniel, you can't be serious." But I was. Their father is their parent. If they only answer to him, then they can lean on him for the phones, the internet, and everything else. Because I won't keep funding my own disrespect. She rubbed her temples, almost pleading. "They're kids. They're still learning." "No," I said firmly. "Sophie is a kid. Liam and Lucas are kids. And they manage to show basic respect. Ethan is 16, old enough to drive, old enough to know exactly what he's doing. Ava is 13, old enough to understand words can wound. If they're old enough to weaponize disrespect, they're old enough to live with the fallout. That night, I changed the locks. The sound of the drill bit into the doorframe was louder than I expected, each turn of the screw like punctuation on a sentence I should have finished a long time ago. I handed new keys to Laura, to the twins, and tucked Sophie's onto a little chain for her backpack. Ethan and Ava's things I packed neatly into boxes and bins, setting them by the front door. When it was done, the house felt different. Not empty, just waiting. Waiting for the confrontation I knew was coming. The confrontation came faster than I expected. Around 4 the next afternoon, my phone buzzed. Laura was calling. "Daniel," she said, her voice tight. "We can't get in the house. Did you change the locks?" "Yes," I said calmly. "The kids' things are packed by the door. You can bring them in to get them, or their dad can pick them up. But until they can treat me with basic respect, they're not living under this roof." There was silence on the line, broken only by the sound of Ava crying in the background. Laura's voice trembled. "You can't just throw them out. They're my children." "I'm not throwing them out because they're your children," I told her. "I'm removing them because they've made it clear they don't recognize me as an authority in my own home. If I'm not a parent to them, then I'm not responsible for them. Their dad can handle it." When I pulled into the driveway that evening, Chris's car was already there. He stood leaning against it, arms crossed, eyes sharp but curious. Ethan and Ava were huddled near Laura, looking more stunned than angry. Chris spoke first. "This seems pretty extreme, Daniel. Over some teenage attitude." I met his stare without flinching. "If your son looked you in the eye and said you weren't his parent, that he didn't have to listen to you, and that your kids didn't matter, what would you do?" He paused. The question hung in the air like a weight. Finally, he muttered, "I'd probably want to teach him a lesson." "That's all I'm doing," I said. "Teaching a lesson about respect and consequences." I turned to Ethan and Ava. They wouldn't meet my eyes at first, but when they finally did, I spoke slowly, so they couldn't mistake a single word. "This isn't about being cruel. It isn't about hating you. It's about respect. You've told me, in words and in actions, that I'm not your parent. Fine. But parents provide. If I'm not your parent, I don't provide." Ethan's mouth opened, then closed. For once, he looked uncertain, not cocky. Ava wiped at her face, eyes red. "But where will we go?" she whispered. "To your dad's," I said gently. "He's your parent. I'm just your mom's husband, remember?" Together, Chris and I loaded their bags into his car. The kids climbed in without another word. Laura stood on the driveway, arms folded, tears in her eyes. She wouldn't look at me as they drove away. When the taillights disappeared, the silence around the house was deafening. The air felt lighter for my kids, but heavier for me and Laura. I knew that night had changed everything, and I had no idea yet whether it would break us or make us stronger. That night, the house felt different. Not just because Ethan and Ava's rooms were empty, but because the tension that had been choking us for months was suddenly gone. My twins finished their homework without being nagged. Sophie brought her blanket downstairs and curled up beside me on the couch, resting her head on my shoulder while we watched a movie. For the first time in a long time, my kids felt comfortable in their own home. But Laura? She couldn't even look at me. She sat across the room, arms crossed, lips pressed tight. When the movie ended and the kids went to bed, the silence between us stretched like barbed wire. Finally, she said, "I can't believe you did this." "I can't believe I had to," I shot back, my voice low. "They're my children, Daniel. My babies. And her voice cracked. "You just sent them away." I leaned forward, elbows on my knees. "I didn't send them away because they're yours. I sent them away because they refused to respect me, in my own house, while tearing down my kids. If Ethan wants to treat me like a stranger, fine. But strangers don't pay for your phone. Strangers don't cook your meals. Strangers don't provide you a home." Her eyes filled with tears, but I didn't back down. "Laura, I love you. And I wanted to love your kids. But I can't keep pouring myself out for people who treat me like I'm nothing. Not when it's starting to poison Liam, Lucas, and Sophie too." She didn't answer. She just shook her head, went upstairs, and closed the bedroom door. I slept on the couch that night, staring at the ceiling, wondering if I had just saved my family, or destroyed it. The days that followed were strange. For my kids, life improved almost overnight. Liam and Lucas stopped asking why the rules seemed different for Ethan and Ava. Sophie went back to drawing, this time with her paper intact. Our home felt lighter. Calmer. But every time Laura looked at me, I saw the storm still raging behind her eyes. A week later, my phone rang. It was Chris. My gut clenched as I answered, expecting anger, maybe even threats. Instead, his voice was surprisingly measured. "Daniel," he said, "I think they've learned something." "What do you mean?" I asked cautiously. "They've been at my place for a week." Ethan's quieter. More thoughtful. "Ava's been asking about her mom nonstop. And both of them, they miss the stability. The structure. Ethan actually told me he didn't realize how much you did for them until it was gone. Ava wanted me to tell you she's sorry for the way she spoke to you." I sat there, the phone pressed to my ear, not sure what to feel. Relief? Vindication? Or suspicion that this was just another phase? Chris cleared his throat. "They want to come back." And just like that, the decision I thought was final was sitting back in my lap. When Chris said the kids wanted to come back, I didn't answer right away. Part of me wanted to slam that door shut for good, to protect the peace we'd finally found. But another part of me, the part that still remembered how hopeful I was when this family first came together, hesitated. That night, I told Laura what Chris had said. Her eyes welled up with tears. "Daniel, please. They're my children. They need to be home." "They can come back," I said slowly, "but not like before. I won't go back to being invisible in my own house. If they return, it has to be with clear boundaries." For once, Laura didn't argue. She nodded, wiping her face. "Okay. Boundaries." 2 days later, Ethan and Ava were back in our living room, their duffel bags dropped by the door. They looked smaller somehow, like a little bit of the cockiness had been drained out of them. I didn't waste time. "Before you settle back in," I said, standing in front of them, "we need to talk." They both nodded. Ethan wouldn't quite meet my eyes, but at least he wasn't smirking. Ava fidgeted with the strap of her bag. "I want to make something clear," I continued. "I'm not asking you to call me Dad. I'm not asking you to love me the way you love your father. But this is my house, and in this house, respect isn't optional. You don't have to like me, but you will treat me with the same respect you'd show any adult who takes care of you. Do you understand?" Ava glanced at Ethan, then whispered, "Yes." Ethan shifted, then finally looked up. "I get it. And I'm sorry for what I said about Sophie. And the stuff with Liam and Lucas. It was messed up." The words hit me harder than I expected. Not perfect, not polished, but genuine. I nodded. "Thank you. That means something." Ava's voice was quieter. "I'm sorry too. I didn't realize how much you did for us until it wasn't there anymore." For the first time in months, I let myself breathe. "All right. You can come back. But understand this, if the disrespect starts again, we'll be right back where we were. Authority and responsibility go together. If I'm not allowed one, I won't take on the other. Deal?" Both of them nodded. It wasn't perfect right away. Old habits don't vanish overnight. But something fundamental had shifted. Ethan didn't argue when I asked him to mow the lawn. Ava said, "Thank you," the next time I drove her to practice. Little things, but they mattered. For the first time, I felt like maybe, just maybe, we could build something real. The months that followed weren't perfect. There were still eye rolls, still muttered complaints, still moments where I had to remind Ethan or Ava that respect was not optional. But something was different. This time, when I spoke, they listened. Maybe not always happily, but the defiance wasn't automatic anymore. 6 months later, the change was undeniable. One night, Ethan came to me at the kitchen table with his math homework. "Can you help me with this problem?" he asked, sliding the book across the table. It was the first time he'd chosen to come to me instead of waiting for Laura. I didn't make a big deal out of it, but inside, it meant everything. Ava, too, started showing small signs. She began saying, "Thank you," without being reminded. She stopped ignoring me when I asked her to do chores. And one Saturday morning, after I drove her to soccer practice, she actually smiled and said, "I appreciate it." For words, but they landed heavier than any apology could. The real test came a year later. Ethan wanted to go to a concert with friends. He asked both me and Laura together. Laura said yes right away, but I had concerns about the venue, the crowd, the late hours. And instead of dismissing me or throwing the old line about not being his dad, Ethan did something I never expected. He listened. He took my concerns seriously, and together we came up with a compromise that made us both comfortable. That's when I knew we'd turned a corner. Looking back, I don't regret changing those locks. Some people called it extreme, maybe even cruel. But sometimes love isn't soft. Sometimes love is a boundary. Sometimes the most loving thing you can do is refuse to be walked over, and to teach kids, yes, even your stepkids, that respect is the foundation of any family. My marriage with Laura is stronger now, too. At first she thought I was tearing the family apart, but eventually she saw the truth. I wasn't giving up on her kids. I was fighting for a relationship built on mutual respect instead of one-sided obligation. My twins and Sophie learned something too. They saw that I would stand up for them, that I wouldn't allow them to be treated like second-class citizens in their own home. They learned that respect isn't negotiable, no matter whose DNA you share. Even Chris and I have a better relationship now. He admitted he respected the fact that I held his kids accountable, and I respect that he backed me up when it counted. So, was I wrong to change the locks and pack their bags? Maybe. Maybe not. But what I do know is this: that night was the turning point that saved my family. Sometimes you have to be willing to be the bad guy for a while in order to teach the lesson that makes you the good guy in the long run. And now, when I hear Sophie giggling with Ava in the kitchen, or see Ethan leaning over the twin science project, I realize something: we're not a perfect family, but we're a real one. And that's more than enough for me.
Our stories don't end here. I've gathered more voices, more secrets, waiting for you. Pick one and let the tales continue.